Hi, good evening. Today is December 4th, 2025, and it is 6 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I am recording this video from my home located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. And this house is located 300 feet away from the house of Mr. Robert Mueller, who was the director of the FBI for several years, some years ago, and that is relevant to this conversation. So today, for this evening, I have a couple of things. So I have a couple of items that are kind of high level, and I have a bunch of on-the-ground observations that I've been recording for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, and they've been, piling up, and I haven't been able to. So in terms of the number of this demo, I'm on the fence between calling it 91-4, like making a fourth segment of the 91, or calling it 93. I'm not sure yet. It depends how it turns out, but it's going to be one of the two. Okay, so I'm gonna get going. Okay, so the first item, let me share my screen with you real quick. Okay. Yes. So my game plan is I'm going to talk first about the high-level items and, well, high level and also legal. There's one update on the legal front, but it's also kind of high level because it's about the things that we talked about on the 91-3, right? The ranking ideas and all that. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to read from my notes because these are observations that I've recorded over the last 3 weeks, and some of them I don't remember by heart, so I have to read what I wrote, and I apologize in advance because, disclaimer, some of the things I wrote might be a bit funny, right? Like they might sound a little bit funny, and that's just because through the years of this, I've developed kind of a sense of humor about these things, right? And the things that they do, right? Sometimes they are kind of amusing. So I apologize for that. Don't take it as it's not a serious matter. It is a serious matter. But like you have to have a sense of humor about this, right? Like otherwise what's the point? Anyhow, right, so let me jump right into it, right? So let me start with this. So on demo 91-3, we talked about a little bit how I use information retrieval techniques to do liability analysis, right, on the legal landscape surrounding this legal harassment campaign that the Communist Party of China has, has been, how do you say that? Has been going on, right? Has had going on for the last 8 months, more or less. So yeah, so in demo 91-3, I talked about how, and this segment I want to like direct it at the kids, right? Like the younger generations that may be interested in pursuing this career, right? Because I think it's a good example, right, of how much fun this is, right? So on demo 91-3, right, I talked about how you could, and I invite people to watch, people that are interested in this topic, please watch that demo, right? Because I will not repeat everything I said here because it would be redundant. But to understand the things I'm going to show you in this part, you need to see or to watch the demo 91-3. Okay, so it's kind of a prerequisite for what I'm going to say. So in that demo, I talked about how I rank the courts to be able to understand what is the liability distribution, to be able to identify the head and the tail of the distribution, so I can, do different things. I could either, target the ones with highest likelihood of being found liable, or I could spread the liability to kind of distribute it in a more uniform way, right, across the distribution. Um, so that was the state of the world for me yesterday, right? And I was doing that, right? But then an idea formed in my mind, right, in my head. I started thinking about how do I deploy the strategy, right? So imagine that I want to that I identify a court that I want to increase the level of likelihood to be found liable, right? How do I implement that strategy, right? But whatever strategy. So while thinking about this, I realized that really these interactions between the courts, right? I mean, and this is at the heart of the strategy that I am employing, right? It might be different if the strategy is different, right? But for this particular strategy I'm employing, at the heart of it, really, what I'm doing is creating relationships between pairs of courts, right? So in reality, because when I filed a notice in the court saying, hey, I filed this other thing in the Supreme Court, for example, right? Or I filed this on federal court. When I do that, right, what I'm creating is a link between the two courts, right? So it occurred to me that, for this particular application, what really matters is the link, not the court, not necessarily the court, but the link, right? What I'm trying to say, right, is that in my approach yesterday, until yesterday, I was operating on a corpus of courts, meaning I was scoring and ranking the courts, right? But when I see this, I realize, well, maybe, so an idea occurs to me, right? What if I replace the corpus? I change the corpus, right? So instead of ranking courts, I rank the relationships between the courts, meaning I rank the arrows, right? So imagine if instead of ranking the courts, I rank the arrows, because really what I'm trying to understand, what I'm trying to figure out is what is the optimal or the most efficient arrow to create, right? So I have time to create one arrow today. Like, so say that I have free time to create a new filing, right? So how do I employ that time, right? And those resources, that's the question. In the way that maximizes the impact with the least amount of effort possible, right? So really, because that's the heart of the question, it seems like what I'm really wanting to do is not to rank the courts, but to rank the arrows, right? It's the arrows what I'm looking for. So with this idea, when this idea formed in my mind, so then I started thinking, well, okay, so how do I create signals for the arrows, right? Because the signals I was creating until yesterday were signals for the courts. So like basically I came with similar scoring signals, but they are relationship or arrow, let's call it arrow centered instead of court centered, right? So the definition of the metric has to do with the arrow, not with the courts. Not with which is the court where I filed the instrument and which is the court that got notified, right? So if you think of that, right, at that point I realized that, and I don't know, like this is one of the things, right, that and I'm talking to the kids, right? When you do these kind of exercises, how do I say this? In this process, right? It's a process of experimentation, right? Really, like you have to come up with ideas, right, and test them. You test them using the technique that we described in the last demo. Meaning, you create metrics, you create formulas, you run them, and you see what is the ranking, right? And then you see if that ranking makes sense. And if it makes sense, what can you infer from that ranking, right? So it's an iterative process, right? So I realized that in the metrics that I created that I was using until yesterday, right? I talked about level of awareness and level of judiciary power, right? So those are two metrics, right? And the other metric was level of potential bias, which I was deriving from the number of motions that were not ruled on or that were procedurally dismissed without addressing the substance, right? So what I was going to say, right, is that when you do these kind of exercises and you find something that works, right, because it's kind of an experimentation process, and in the process you might find something that does work, right? One thing that I don't know, this works for me, right? I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, but this is what I find for me that works. I try to ask myself the question, like when I find something that works, right? Because there's different approaches you can take, right? If you find something that works, you can celebrate and say, I'm a good engineer, and that's it, right? But the other thing you can do is ask yourself the question, why is that this work? Like, what is the meaning behind this work? I mean, if it's working, right, it's because the formula or the metrics or both are accurately representing a phenomenon, right? So the question you have to ask yourself is, what is that phenomenon, right? And that's when the insights happen, right? When you ask yourself that question. If you only, see the good ranking and celebrate because you found the formula, you are not gaining any growth from the experience, right? You have to ask yourself a more philosophical question, like, what does this really mean, right? So, when I thought about the arrows, right, I asked myself that question. Well, assume for a second that the arrows are the thing that I need to rank. That's the real corpus, the arrows, not the chords. Sorry. If the arrows are the real corpus, right, the interesting corpus, right, what does that mean, right? At that point, I think I understood that when I defined the metrics before about level of awareness and potential of bias, those metrics were good, right? And they did work, but they did work because they really talk is about the arrow, right? They really describe is the arrow, not the chords, right? I mean, I guess intuitively, right? When I designed them, I understood that, but at an unconscious level, I didn't really grasp it, right? What I'm trying to say is, well, let me give you a concrete example, right? So say the federal court. We talked about the federal court having the highest judiciary power, right? 5, equivalent to the Supreme Court. But in this scale that I created on Demo 91-3, it had a score of 5 out of 5. Think about what that means, right? So if the Supreme Court, if the federal court is aware of, let's call it a crime being committed on the lower court, because their level of judiciary power is higher than the other courts. If I wanted to represent that graphically with the arrow, I would make that arrow bigger, right? Because I mean, it's like I don't want to be like, I don't want to sound dorky, but it's like in the movie, like with great power comes great responsibility. If you have the highest power among all the courts, you have also the highest responsibility because you were given that power for a reason, right? So the level of judiciary power that the court has affects the size of the arrow. Let's try to look at it visually, right? It's an idea that it's hard for me to elaborate verbally, but if I could translate it into an analogy, I would put that arrow being bigger. That's why I put this arrow here, this red arrow being bigger, right? Imagine that because the judiciary power of the federal court, right, is higher, and the direction of that arrow is in that way because the document was filed in the federal court, right? So remember, the arrow represents that the 387th is aware that I filed something on the federal court, right? So the direction of the arrow is in that direction because of that, because the document was filed. So the arrow is pointing towards the court where the document was filed, right? That was the definition that I created on the previous demo. So because the judiciary power of the federal court where the document is being filed is so high, that makes visually, in this arbitrary representation I'm proposing, the width of that arrow bigger, okay? Also, if the violation or the offense, the violation of the rights of the person or the crimes, whatever, right, that are being committed in the, or that, that happened in the court where that is being made aware that, that thing was reported to another court. The gravity of that, of whatever happened, also, I'm just proposing a set of rules that increase the size of the arrow, like the width, right? The gravity increases the width, right? And also the level of bias of the court, the perceived level of bias via this proxy metric that we created, that is the number of ignored motions, right? The number of motions that were not ruled on or that were dismissed procedurally. That also increases the width. So with this framework in mind, what I'm representing here is, because it's a multidimensional problem, right? Like, and I could go through all the variations, but just to give you a couple of them, if a court that is highly biased, right, commits a small violation, that may not matter much to the federal court, right? Because they might dismiss it as, this is too small of an issue for us, right? Just, giving you an example. If a court commits a big violation, but shows a small bias, like there is no much evidence of bias, the federal court could dismiss it as, well, maybe there is something that you're not telling me, but they don't seem to be biased, right? They must have had a reason to do this, right? If the violation is grave and the bias is huge, but the court where this is being reported has no power, then the arrow is small, right? So you see, this framework that I'm proposing maximizes the size of the arrow or the width when the violation is grave, the bias is high, and the power of the other court is high, right? Only in those conditions, the width of the arrow is maximized, right? So with that framework in mind, imagine that and this is what I did, right, last night and this morning. With that framework in mind, imagine visually that I applied this algorithm that I described to all the arrows in this directed graph, and I changed the size of the arrows. Then, to really compute the total score of the arrows, what I need to do, right, is sum the width of the arrows going out from a court, right, and coming into a court, right? And with those two numbers, I can compute what would be like the optimal pair, right? My goal with all this is to determine, on which actors to focus in which court, right? But the key is to rank the arrows, not to rank the courts. So anyhow, long story short, this is exactly what I did, right? And I think the results were amazing, right? So with this, I got to the conclusion that to unlock this, the solution was to go to federal court and directly act against the actors on the 387 court. And if you think about it from a non-engineering point of view, like if you think about what this means, means is going to the highest, with the court with the highest judiciary power, and report the court where the gravest, or the actors, right, where the gravest violations were committed, and then that shows the highest level of bias, right? So these, pairing them together, is an explosive combination, because the violations are so grave and the bias is so obvious that the actor with the highest level of power cannot ignore it without being found liable, right? But you see, right? I mean, after I see this, I see, well, this makes sense, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? But you see, there's 5 courts and there's all these relationships. Without this ranking system, I would have not been able to derive these solutions in such an obvious matter, right? I would have had to consult several attorneys, right, to get to this recommendation. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I consult professionals, right, if I had access to attorneys, I don't, because I live in Katy, and we talked about this before. But if I had access to attorneys, probably, right, if I consult a top-level attorney that knows about these topics, about complex litigation in multiple courts, they would probably have arrived at the same conclusion, and probably very quickly, right? But with the resources I have, I would have never arrived at this conclusion. Right? I was only able to arrive at it because I'm using engineering. Right? So I don't know. I just wanted to share that. So with that, I created a document, right? And I amended. Well, I filed. It's not amended yet. I filed for an amendment. I filed for a leave to amend the complaint that was originally against Morgan Heibner. And again, I applied the same algorithm that I described, it, not to the courts, but to the players inside the court. And using this technique, William Kyle Adams came at the top, even above Pickett, even though Pickett committed the gravest violation. But Adams came up at top. Okay. So what I did, I filed for a leave to amend, and filed and amended. And let me show you. Let me show you what it looks like. Okay, so it's in the bucket where I keep all the court evidence, and inside of Troy Pickett's folder, there's the folder for actions taken against the wire fraud. Inside that, there's a folder for federal court, and there is a folder for December 4, 2025 filings. So the document in question is this one. So you see, now William Kyle Adams is the top, the first respondent, right? So now the caption, the styling of the case will change, right? It would be me against him. It all, right? With the others. And, you know, I basically ported over to this amended complaint all the allegations regarding the, you know, all the frauds that we've discussed before in a way that, you know, the narrative flows, makes sense, it's concise. You know, it's very well, the document is very well finished. And, you know, in the exhibits, there's all the evidence of the frauds is there, right? Including the fraudulent document that caused the dismissal of my petition for writ of mandamus with the First Appellate Court by a panel led by Chief Justice Adams. And in this document was filed by the Adams law firm. Right? You can see that here. And all the other things, right? Like the dismissals, like the Pickett's, you know, filing, confessing that, you know, he was acknowledged that the orders were not signed before the 14, all that, right? Like everything is in here. It's a comprehensive package. Like, you know, if the anti-corruption office, I think it's called, of the FBI gets this, like, you know, I don't have any saying, right? Like I cannot tell anybody what to do, but I believe, right, based on the software that I'm using and the expertise that I developed while doing this, I think this is a self-contained package. Like if the anti-corruption office gets this, like here they have everything they need to take an action. Right? There is even the, you know, the docket state is a snapshot in there. The letter of Morgan Heibner demanding payment and trying to deceive me, right, with the saying that the orders, that the September 8th hearing was to render orders, right? The Adobe email showing that Troy Pickett controls the Adams law firm. The fraudulent orders with the fraudulent timestamps in the certificate of service, you know, dated 2 weeks before the orders were supposedly signed, showing that they weren't served to me as signed orders. Like everything is in here, right? And in the arguments of this amended petition, it's clearly spelled out the wire fraud, right? Like the wire fraud allegation is spelled out with all the different ingredients that are needed for wire fraud charges, right? So this shows clearly in black and white that there's an allegation of serious criminal criminal activity, right? And importantly, I'm, you know, without any, how do you say that? Without being shy, I'm openly calling the Adams law firm a RICO enterprise, right? Like, and I explain why, right? Why I believe they are a corrupt organization or enterprise. So, it's all in there. Now, interestingly, today I filed 2 documents, right? One document was this, and the second document was this other one. Let me show you. In the other case, right? In the case that is the class action. The reason I filed this one is, well, I filed the 2 because I wanted to make a test to see if the 2 got into their dockets at the same time, which they didn't. Right? This got into the docket, but the other one, just half an hour ago when I checked, it hadn't gotten into the docket, right? So it's delayed. Now, it doesn't, it could be because it has more pages. It has 70 pages, and this one has, I don't know, 4 pages, right? It could be something related to that, right? To the number of pages, or I don't know. But I filed documents with more than 100 pages before, and they get in within an hour, right? But this one, it's been 4 or 5 hours, and it hasn't gotten in yet. I mean, the other one, right? Like the one that I just showed you. This one got in. And you can see that because it has this, it even has a document index, right? But the other one I'm showing you is my copy. Like, it's not the actual file copy. So it hadn't gotten in. The other thing that was interesting to me is that the clerk was wearing gloves, like those gloves that the nurses wear, which, I mean, it's not, they handle paper from, probably hundreds of people per day, or maybe she is being careful, protecting herself. I'm nobody to judge, right? But I have to tell you, of all the times, and I've been doing this process litigation in all these courts, as you can see, for 8 months at this point, right? During all this time, the hundreds of documents that I filed, I've never seen a clerk wearing gloves. This was the first time. It just, caught my eye because of that. But interestingly, when I was coming back home, I received a couple of messages on my way back home, right, from the informant. And he told me that the network, the Adams law firm already is aware of what the filing says, even though it's not in the docket, right? And he described the situation as horrific. Like, they are when they read the document, they panicked, right? And also told me that personnel from the court are horrified of what the document says, right? So it's interesting, right, that the Venezuelan informant knows about this before the document got into the docket, right? I mean, it's amazing, right? I'm not talking about the informant. I'm talking about the level of control that the CPC has over everything, right? Everything that is computerized. But it is what it is. So that is the instance of the the filing, that filing today, right? Yes. So let's see what happens there, right? So the other thing I wanted to mention is that this is more about the topic of the aggregators. Okay. This, I'm not going to go into much detail because it's very early on. I have to do more research on this. I have to do more experiments on this, right? But it's an idea, and I'm going to mention it in case anybody out there is interested in exploring this area. It could be an interesting area of research. This would be more like economic research. So at this point, this is not even a theory. This is a hypothesis, right? And needs to be rigorously tested and experimented with using scientific methods. But I'm going to mention them here as an idea. It's not an accusation. It's not. Now, before I tell you this thing that I want to tell you, because it is, how do I say this? What I'm going to tell you, it might be a bit scary. And again, it's just a hypothesis at this point, right? I need to do way more research on this, and this needs to be studied by people that know, a team of people. Like, this requires a team of people. Like, this is not something that I can do from my home. But I'm going to share it. But before I share it, I'm going to share 2 anecdotes that will be useful, right, for what I'm going to say next. So the first one is about a system that I call Clone Plus Relay, which is a communication system that I created and this is described in some of the demos before and in the books. It's a system that I created to avoid them being able to intercept my communications, right? Like messages, right, or audio. So when I did this, right, I'm not going to go into much detail for obvious reasons, but part of the technology is injecting packets, TCP packets, or UDP packets into common internet services, right? So imagine, I don't know, if you use, for example, YouTube, right? Imagine that you had the ability to change your Google TV or your smart TV software to inject certain packets, small packets, in specific ways, and imagine that you are able to route those packets in ways that are very hard to detect. That's what I'm doing, right? So the reason why this works is because the traffic of video, for example, YouTube, is very heavy. It's a lot of megabytes, right, of data per second. So for them to catch, a small string of bytes is very hard, very, very hard, because they have to analyze byte by byte the entire video, and they don't know when I'm going to insert the byte, or in which video, if I'm going to insert it at all, right? So this requires a tremendous amount of computing power and know-how, and they can't do it, right? So when I started doing this, right? So the technique is, of course, if I'm going to do this, I have to say that I'm going to do it through YouTube. I have to play a video on YouTube, right, where I'm going to do the thing that I do. So when I started doing this, right, and this kind of shows you what is the technological arms race that I've had going on with them for years, right? So when I started doing this, I started picking videos randomly, right? I started using videos randomly from Netflix and from YouTube to inject my small streams of bytes, right? When I started doing this, I've noticed that they started, you know how YouTube has this feature that after you watch a video, then automatically a next video starts playing, right? You know that feature, right? Like you may watch a video, and if you don't do, in your TV, for example, if you don't do anything, the next video starts playing, and YouTube picks the video for you, right? Like you don't have a playlist. It's just like the next video that you're most likely to watch, basically, right? They pick it for you and they start playing it. So I've noticed that when I started doing this, YouTube magically started showing me low resolution videos, right? I remember, and I'm going to mention these details in case anybody investigates this thing and is interested, right? I don't know. But it's an interesting thing, right? So I was watching Metallica videos, right? 4K. Of course, I picked the highest resolution videos because that makes it harder for them to find the bytes. So what they did in response to that is that they started forcing my queue of videos in YouTube to force me to watch, not me, the TV, right? To force the device to get the lowest quality videos, lowest resolution, like videos from 1986, right? Like old concerts. The reason behind that is because the lower resolution videos occupy less bandwidth. So it's less bytes to process, right? You see? So what they were doing was reducing the search space by forcing specific videos. Now, the other interesting thing is that those videos that they forced were created 2 weeks ago, right? Not 2 weeks ago, but like at that day that I noticed that, for example, the video was recent, right? While the other videos that I was watching organically were videos that were created 3 years ago, right? Because they were concerts of 2021, 2020, things like that. But this set of videos that they wanted the system to watch, were videos that they created recently, and they intentionally, I imagine, uploaded them low resolution to make their search easier, right? And all this is going to be important in a second, right? Believe me. Yes. So they did that, right? So they. But there was another data point about those videos that I wanted to tell you. So they were low resolution. They were created, right. And the other thing is that they had the number of views in the videos was small. That was the other tell. Like all the other videos that were organically played by my YouTube account, right? Before I started doing the Clone Plus relay, all those videos had millions of views, right? Because they were very popular Metallica concerts. But the ones that they injected had 100 views, right? So that was another way that I could see that this was manipulated. But the reason why they had to create the videos, they couldn't use the videos that were old, right? That were posted 3 years ago. The reason is because they need to control the content. Why? Because of the predictable request pattern, right? It's the same. Like when we talked about in the book and in other places about the predictable request, we usually refer to the predictable request as a stream of bytes, okay, of text that represents bytes, right? So if they know that your email, you send an email, they know that your email address is going to be present in the body, and that gives them an anchor, right, to try to decrypt it. And I've always talked about that in the context of known text, like the plain text attack. I think I call it in the books. But this attack, in reality, is not only plain text. It also applies to binary data. For example, videos. If they know the content of the video that you're watching, they can use this because they have the stream of bytes. They can do the same technique and find the key, right? Find the decryption key based on that they know what the bytes are for the video that you're watching. So that's why they needed to insert their own videos, their own Metallica videos, because that way they have full control over the byte stream. They know the original stream of bytes. And because of that, the search problem is easier. And also the cryptanalysis technique works better, right? Because they control the content. So that's observation number one, right? I mean, this is a context number one, context item number one. The second, I want to show you is this. And this is more, I'm showing you this more because it's a generic concept, okay? And I'm going to use the two things to give you the two hypotheses that I want to give you. So I don't know, let's look for WebMD, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking for, basically I'm looking for what is the highest ranking page of WebMD that talks about an actual illness that is high, that has high monetary value, okay? Okay, mental illness, I think this is probably it, okay? So this is what I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna go to trends.google.com. Right. I'm going to do this quickly. I mean, I could talk about this topic for hours, for weeks, right? But I'm going to do this very quickly, just to show you something very specific. So I'm going to look for ADHD. Right. If you do this, and you do say, for example, the past year. Let me see. Yeah, so this is a good example. So, for example, look at the blue one, right? So let's talk about. So this is what 2025 between. So this would be December and April. Okay, let's look in that time frame. Right. Yeah, this is a good view, right? So you have to pick the right time frame to be able to observe this. But look at this, right? Look at how regular what this is, right? So this is a traffic distribution from Google Trends. Google Trends is a property from Google where they analyze the traffic patterns for queries, right? And you can do this worldwide, in the US, etc. So this is the traffic pattern for ADHD, right? what I'm going to say, right? I'm going to say it based on experience working as a search ranking engineer, right? Please, give me the benefit of the doubt on this. This is highly unusual. Like this shape that you're seeing here, this is not something organic. It's too, how do you say this? It's too regular, right? Like it's too, if you have a large group of individuals, we're talking about the entire planet, right? So this is worldwide on a period of 3 months. You would expect to see huge variations, right? Because there might be things that come up in the news, because there might be, things that happen, right? A medication for ADHD gets approval or gets banned, or things like that. And those things create peaks and valleys, right? But not this regular. I mean, not at these regular intervals. What you're seeing here is the fingerprint of the machine, right? So this is Liana Technologies. This is Liana Technologies manipulating the query in fixed intervals of time. That's why this thing is so regular, okay? And believe me, I spent years debugging queries to understand how Liana Technology does it, and I can spot it, right? I can give you a list of queries, right? Like it's no problem, right? I'm showing you this just as an example to introduce the two aggregators that I think exist, and this is the theory that I wanted to talk about, right? So in the previous demo, we talked about aggregators, right, and how big technology companies are in reality aggregators, right? If they handle a localized, a globalized, a small group of platforms that are global, handle a big majority of the traffic, right? That creates a monopoly control and creates information asymmetry, and therefore leads to control of the individuals using it by the Communist Party of China. So the first thing I wanted to tell you is related to what I said before of how they were using their control over the videos on YouTube to try to find the bytes that I'm injecting, right? So I've been doing analysis on Spotify artists, right? Based on traffic patterns that are present in Google Trends. And the thing doesn't look organic, right? So the hypothesis at this point is a hypothesis, right? That is forming in my understanding is that maybe the artists are also aggregators. Why? Well, because think about it, right? If a large group of people in the planet is listening to the same song, right? Because they know the stream of bytes that are in that song, they could decrypt the traffic of everybody listening to the song, right? Easily, because they know, right? They know what is in the song. So it leads to a plain text, a plain binary stream attack, right? A known binary stream attack. So the hypothesis is that maybe, right, what they're doing is pumping certain items in the things that people are listening to, because they control the platform, they control what people listen to, basically, right? Like they can tweak the level of exposure. And with that, if they, for example, increase the distribution of a specific song, then they can intercept the traffic of more people using that song, right? And it's, I mean, thinking about that idea, it would be a brilliant idea, because then you can target by gender, by gender, like you can target by type of artists, right? You can target by demographics, because certain groups of people will listen to certain artists or certain songs, right? So, but again, right? And so how to really test this, right? It would require doing a statistical analysis to find anomalies, comparing the trends of today's, top songs versus how demographics behave in terms of their, how do you say that? In terms of, how many songs or which songs were liked by large groups of people before 1998, right? To see if the group behavior changed, right? If the group behavior is abnormal. What I'm saying is something like looking at this chart, right? If you compare the listening behavior of the society, right? Pre-1998 to the listening group, the group behavior, right, of the society today, I mean, both are groups of individuals. Of course, you can make the argument that, well, society changed, right, or the technology affected the adoption of or the consumption of the content. Uh, so I don't know. It's a complex topic, right? It doesn't have an easy answer. But because I've seen how they weaponize the fact that they control the content platforms. In the case that I was describing, the music videos on YouTube, the Metallica videos, right? I can extrapolate the idea and I can see how they can weaponize other platforms that stream music to a lot of people, right? So if they're doing that, it would make sense for them to push for concentration of the artist, right, of the content being consumed. Because if the content is too fragmented, then it would be very difficult to apply targeting, right, on the thing. But if the consumption of the content is concentrated, then they can do a lot of things, right? So that's number one. Um, the other one, it's a lot. It's a lot more complex, right? I don't know if I can do this. I haven't uh, run the numbers. I don't know. Let me try. Let me see if I can do something here really quickly. So let me see. If I ask who are the original members of the PayPal mafia? Okay. Now list all the companies directly controlled by all these individuals, including companies they invest in using their VC firms. Okay. Now let me tell you what I'm going with this. Now try to estimate how many US employees all these companies have, just to have an idea. Right. So this look at this, right? So I'm just looking at how many employees this small group of individuals have, right? Just to have an idea. But again, like this is something that needs to be researched by a team of people, right? But this is just to give an idea, right? So just here, right? Just looking at Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, right? So let's take the minimum value, right? The 70,000, for example, instead of the 90,000, right? So this would be 82, 86, 88, say 90, 95. This is about 220,000 employees in the US, right? Just this, right? And this is not including Google, Meta, and right. Let's see, how many employees do Google, Meta, and Motorola have combined in the US? Wow. So it's about 150,000 more, right? So in total, it's almost 400,000 people that this small group of individuals employ, right? In the US alone. So we're talking about 400,000 people. Uh, Let me see, how many working right? Okay, let's go with the lower boundary because we did the same with the other one, right? So say 70 million. Right. So this small group of individuals, which we're talking about only, and we have to add Microsoft, right? How many employees does Microsoft have in the US? Wow. So it's like 120,000 more, right? So this small group of individuals employ directly almost 600,000 people in the US of a universe of 60 million. So that's about 1%. So imagine what that means, right? It means that 12 individuals, right, or 14, depending how you count it, right, directly employ 1% of the US workforce. Right? And who are the richest people in the US? Look at that. So all of them are in tech, except Warren Buffett, right? Is the only one that is not. So, I mean, this is interesting, right? So the top 10 in terms of net worth in the US is dominated by this group of people, right? And they happen also to be direct employers of about 1% of the US population, right? And this is not any population. They are, of course, the tech population, right? So they are the direct employers of the. So I mean, it's a hell of a coincidence that, the richest people in the U.S. are in tech, and they happen to employ 1% of the total workforce of the U.S. The total, right? 1% of the total, and of course, they are employing people in tech, right? Let's see this. How many software engineers are there in the US? Right. So imagine, right? Of course, not all the employees they have are software engineers, but a conservative, because those are all software companies, right? And I'm only including the companies that they directly own, not the ones that they invest in, etc. But I think a conservative estimate is that they could maybe employ half of all the software engineers in the US, something like that, right? And about 1% of the employees, total employees in the US. Uh, so I mean, it's too many coincidences, right? What this suggests is that these people are aggregators, like themselves. They are aggregators. That's why they exist. I mean, that's why these billionaires exist, because they are a vehicle for the CPC, for the Communist Party of China, to aggregate people by employing them, right? Think about it. If you think about, right, who has information about you as an individual? Probably, the people that have the most information about you are probably your doctor, your accountant, your spouse, and your employer, right? So by them employing you, I mean, I'm talking probably to the tech people, right? To the people that work in tech. By them employing you, they gain access to a lot of information, right? They gain access to your address, to your phone number, to your social security number, to your insurance. I don't know what level of visibility they have, but they have some. Based on my experience, because some time ago I had to do some health claims, and Twitter got involved, right? Twitter was my employer at the time, and a person from HR at Twitter had access to my records from the insurance, because I had conversations with her about this particular claim. So I could tell you that the employer has some visibility about your health records, right? From the insurance side of things. They have your social security number, right? They have your routine, because they see when you when you card in and card out from the office, right? It's a lot. It's a lot of information, and your employer has all that information. So these people, I mean, I'm talking about these figures that have these super high net worth. I mean, part of the reason why this is the hypothesis, right? That part of the reason why they exist and the level of inequality among the distribution of wealth is so high is because they need to be aggregators, because their function, one of their they have many functions, of course, but one of the functions they have is to be aggregators, because by employing you directly or indirectly, they gain control. I mean, I'm talking about the CPC, right? They gain control about your personal information, right? So they might be aggregators as well. So one way to test this hypothesis would require a team of researchers looking at the distribution of wealth pre-1998 and after 1998 to see if this is abnormal, right? And of course, the same argument could be made that, well, if it's abnormal, it's because the technology changed the way the wealth distribution works. But, society has existed for thousands of years, right? It's, uh, I would think that this would have happened before, right? This kind of anomaly, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. The other thing I want to say is that, and this is more anecdotal, right? But when I was at Google, for example, it was always surprising to me to see how open the company was, right? Like, they give you this laptop for you to work, and there was no limits in what you can do with the laptop. Like, you could open your personal email, you could do whatever you wanted, right? You could be on Facebook if you wanted. And but think about it, right? If you're using a company resource, the computer and the network, the VPN, whatever, right, that belongs to the company, they have the right to monitor the traffic and to intercept it and do whatever they want with that traffic, right? So what I'm saying is, it is possible that the other reason why they are aggregators in this way is because by employing the tech employees and having them 8-10 hours in the office, right, while they check their email, they say, go crazy, do whatever you want, right? But that gives, because it's implicit that they have the right to see what you're doing, right? So I don't know. It's like, all the arrows are pointing in the same direction, right? That's the way it looks to me right now. But as I said at the beginning, it's just a hypothesis, right? I need to do more research on this. So I'm going to move on to another topic. Okay, so I mean, I have a lot of items here. Yeah, so I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna cut this demo here. Well, there's one thing that I think is important. Let me add this to this one, right? It's about this particular document, right? So this is an experiment that I ran, and it was a very simple experiment, right? So what this is, right? This is the list of addresses in Lake Point Estates where Robert Mueller has his house that are marked in the GeoIndex of the Elon Musk GeoIndex, what I call the Elon Musk GeoIndex, the GeoIndex, the database that I captured on September 11th, 2024. Which is the database that this network and Diosdado Cabello and all their agents use to follow people and intercept traffic and all those things, and to record the crypto payments as well. So, basically, this is a ranked list of these agents that live in Lake Point Estates that are all neighbors of Robert Mueller and of me, right? I'm also a neighbor. And they're ranked by the amount of crypto payments that they have recorded in the database of Elon Musk that I captured. So I reported this list of people to the IRS months ago, but they had the names changed, right, in the registration. Some of them had the names changed in the registration, right? Some of the most important ones. So of course, I reported them with the wrong name back then, right? But after I found the booklet that Phil Denning gave me, and I didn't know I had, what I did is that I joined the data in the booklet with the list of agents by address that I had reported to the IRS that live in this close gated community, right? And I did this with Gemini, right, or with ChatGPT, one of the two, I can't recall. And I asked the AI to basically, assign the right name to the ones that were changed and to tell me which ones were changed in the registration, right? And I have the list because I have computed that list when I reported them to the IRS with the names changed, right? And it produced this list, right? So it's interesting because, so this column that says mismatch tells you, I mean, this is a signal, right, on itself. If they change their name in the registrations for Benn County, it means that they're very prominent because the network went to the length of changing their name to obscure it, right? So what you can do, you can come to this spreadsheet, and you can filter, right, by whether it was changed, and filter it that way, right? So you see there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21, right? So 21 of the houses, and in this list, there's only 63 houses, right? In this list. So these are houses that have the crypto payments on the database that I captured, right? There's 63. There's another 30 houses that are marked, but they don't have crypto payments. So I imagine they're like lower level agents, right? Or they haven't done something significant to get awards for crypto. But these ones have, right? So the fact that the registrations were changed is a signal on itself. And if you combine that with the score, which is represented by the sorting, so the ones at the top, so this is what they have numbers, right? Like LP1 means this is the agent with the highest score, right? Who is Ackerman, right? Of 24802 North Point Place, right? That's the top. So he's both the top agent in terms of crypto payments and happen to have the address, the name obscure in the register. So he has the two signals, the raw score and also the fact that they changed his name, right? So he is very prominent. It's a no-brainer, right? Right. Let me see if there's anybody here that right. So for example, Joel Gray, right? You can find him here, right? So he's here, LP29. This is the name that sounds Middle Eastern that they changed the house to, right? Supposedly it was Suleiman Iqbal, right? But his real name is Joel Gray, right? According to the booklet. Right. The other example here is Christopher Bonner, right? The agent next to me, the other house next to me. The name was also changed, and you see the real name is John Miko. Right? So anyhow, it could be. But thinking more on the generalization of things, this signal of finding registrations that were changed, and I mean people that are marked in the UA index and whose name in the public records was altered. Like that is a signal. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close this demo here, and I'm going to, because I only talked about the high-level things and this specific observation about Lake Point Estates. I think I'm going to name this demo 91-4, right? Because it makes sense to bundle it with the series of the 91s. And then I'm going to leave the on-the-ground observations for a separate demo that is going to be 93. Okay, I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. So I thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Okay.